Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Movie Time, where we're going to be talking about Elvis. That's right, Elvis is out, Baz Luhrmann's latest and greatest. Blake and I will be discussing our thoughts about the movie. It did really well at the box office during its opening weekend, so did this help bring cinemas back? Well, maybe for a certain generation, and we'll touch base on that as well. How does this rank amongst Baz Luhrmann's movies? I'm sure we'll be debating about that as well. So sit back, relax, grab a favorite snack of yours, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Movie Time, starting now. Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to, well, at this point we're considering this a bonus episode of Movie Time. I'll explain about all that in a minute, but you got myself, Rene, LOWKEY GEEK here, and my boy, Blake the Wolf. What's going on, my brother?
Rene, back at it again with the Elvis review. Glad to be doing this.
Oh, I'm sure you are, just as much as I am. Looking forward to talking about Elvis again. So basically, a little peek behind the curtain. We actually recorded an episode talking about Elvis last week. And then right before I was about to upload it, I realized that all of Blake's audio was non-existent, much to my dismay. Now, I was not doing that on purpose. I was not trying to, block him from giving his thoughts and opinions on the movie, because why in the world would I ever do that? I mean, I feel like his opinions matter almost as much as mine. But that being said, we are a week later and we're just deciding to let's just redo this. And we, gave us a little bit more time to think about it maybe and talk about and try to recreate the magic that we had during the episode of Elvis that we recorded previously. But is the magic ever really gone? I feel like there's magic with anything that we do,
As Elvis says, a little more action, a little less conversation, but in our case, we're bringing both. That's fire, a hunk of burning hot takes. Let's go. I'm happy to do it again. I love doing this.
Nice. Yeah, it's always going to be a fun time and fun conversation. So if you are coming across this for the very first time, welcome. If you like what you see and you want to see more, again, on YouTube, don't forget, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Hit that notification bell so you get notified every time a new video is uploaded. And if you are an audio listener, you could check us out on the LOWKEY GEEK podcast channel on your podcast platform of choice, where you can find this episode and a whole bunch of others there. So that being said, let us talk about Elvis as I clear my throat a little bit. That makes for great radio. So Baz Luhrmann. So Baz Luhrmann, I feel like he's definitely one of those directors that takes his time when it comes to every project of his. The last time we saw him with anything was with The Great Gatsby, or Gatsby, in 2013. So it's been a while since we've seen a movie of his, and it was kind of exciting to see him come up with his telling of the story of Elvis, because if you are familiar with Luhrmann's line of work, he is a very showy type of director. He loves visual effects. He loves the glitz, the shine, the sometimes at times maybe absurdity of the spectacle, right? So it's definitely one of those like movie going experiences. You can expect an amazing soundtrack. You can expect a lot of great camera, cinema effects, all that stuff like that. Great editing. And it's kind of fitting for someone like Elvis, who was that constant showman, right? Like, he's all about the performance, whether it's the way he sings, the way he dances, the stage sets, his costumes, all that stuff like that. So I was really looking forward to this, and going into this, I was somewhat familiar with the Elvis storyline. I do have a quite musical family, and I remember summers in Maryland visiting my uncle and my aunt. They're huge Elvis fans, and that Hawaii concert of his that was pressed on vinyl, I would hear that almost on a daily basis. That's how much of a fan they were. And my only other Funny tidbit when it comes to Elvis is I never forgot this episode of The Twilight Zone from the 80s, the 80s iteration of The Twilight Zone, where the story was you had this Elvis impersonator that found himself back in time meeting a very young Elvis, bonding together. I think he was portraying his long lost brother that he lost at birth. Elvis is into one type of music. The impersonator, who obviously knows his career, is trying to sway him more towards the rock. Elvis didn't want to do that. They got into a huge fight. Elvis ends up dying by accident, and this guy takes over his life and career and goes on the rest of his life and existence being the one and true Elvis. So I thought that was a very interesting Twilight Zone episode. But Blake, I know for a fact, you've told me offline that you studied quite a bit of rock history, and Elvis is definitely something and someone you're familiar with. So what were your feelings heading into this movie, and what were you expecting?
At school, History of Rock Parts 1 and 2 were like two of my favorite classes. Not to mention that I'm just like a music person, hardcore. Used to have a music blog, obsessive music collector type, record collection, all that. And that's something that I don't talk about much because we're always doing movies on here, but it's a long time passion of mine. Plus, I'm from Oklahoma. We had like at my dad's company dinners, we had an Elvis impersonator, somebody who worked all the time at every company event. Um, there was my uncle was hardcore obsessive, like every piece of anything in his home that could be Elvis was Elvis. It was just like so in the water. And then I also was growing up for whatever reason, I was super into like Grease and Elvis. And for some reason that like spoke to me hardcore. I'm not the only person. Somebody was talking about how boomers are an original Elvis generation where they're fans when he's cool, and then being raised by boomers, that coolness like translated to a whole nother generation. We'll talk about box office in a little bit, but some of the talk before this movie was like, will young people really care about Elvis? And it seems like he's transcendent as a musician, and his music has stood the test of time, of course. Everyone knows that and knows some of his songs. But then even more the allegory of Elvis, the story of Elvis, which this movie gets into in a way that a lot of people aren't aware of Elvis's backstory, or as intimately aware as they get into some of the depths of his career. He's in some ways like almost like a Greek archetypal tragic figure, and this super top of Mount Olympus guy. Still the greatest selling solo artist of all time. Right now, the album for this movie is doing really well. It was top 10 on the iTunes charts, at least last I checked. So we'll get into box office stuff and our more specific thoughts about the movie and the story there. But overall, super familiar with Elvis. So I went into this one also a fan of Baz Luhrmann. I think you and I might come from a slightly different point of view there, but I've seen all but one of Baz Luhrmann's movies. Moulin Rouge was super important to me as a teenager, and I've seen all of his movies since then as appointment viewing. It's a big deal, and I was very excited about this one. It met my expectations. I'm really glad. It's kind of like a perfect combination of Baz Luhrmann movie, music, spectacle, Elvis movie, music, spectacle. That was a really smart and clever idea for if Baz Luhrmann was going to do a biopic. It makes a lot of sense to do that one. And overall, I think it was a success, and I'm excited to delve more deeply into this movie with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a movie I also found myself enjoying. And I think a lot of that has to do with the acting. The two main actors in the movie, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But also Baz Luhrmann's, his eye and how he puts movies together. Like, I really do feel like it does work well with this type of character or cast of characters, because it's a little larger than life, right? And that's kind of like how he directs, and he likes to direct stuff like that. You're probably more familiar with his body of work than I am. But with the sample size that I've watched, it is, if not just what I was expecting from a Baz Luhrmann movie, and I did not hate that at all. I really really enjoyed it. If there was one criticism, well, I have two. One, it's definitely a long movie. It's definitely a long movie, and it was something that I was not expecting. For some reason, I didn't look at the runtime, and then when I sat down,
No.
and then I was looking at my phone real quick, and just out of curiosity, I was like, "How long is this movie?" And it clocking in under 3 hours. I was like, "Whoa!" Now this explains why there's not a lot of showings during the day for this thing, because for theaters to allow more time, especially like when this came out, obviously Top Gun Maverick was still a big thing. So they were dedicating more screen time for that type of movie. So I was very, very surprised by that. But I didn't feel like there were moments in the movie that dragged. I felt like all the time that was spent was purposely spent, and still telling a lot of story. And Elvis, there's a lot going on there, and maybe some will say that maybe more could have been said or more could have been covered, especially depending on the point of view you're looking at. My only other criticism I have, and this is also very typical Baz Luhrmann, is the mix of Elvis's music with modern rap and hip hop. Like, that was one thing that kind of threw me off. Not saying that that's a bad thing, but I wanted to hear Elvis's music, and I wanted to hear them straight up. I didn't want them to kind of mix it and modernize it, for the hip and younger generation, but maybe that is what's helping this resonate with a younger crowd. In Elvis's style and music has been sampled time and time again, right? So this is not the first time we've heard these type of mixes and all that. But when you're talking about Elvis, I just want to hear the music for what it is, because it's great stuff, and if anything, I was wondering if this was going to affect kind of like the viewing, the viewing from like an older generation, especially like in the type of theater that I was at. So when I went to see the movie, it was a Friday morning, like 11:30, and I would say probably 75 to 80% of the audience that was there was a much older generation. And I'm talking about grandparents, mothers, dads, not a lot of people my age and younger, not a lot of that, so it was definitely an older crowd, but they ate the movie up like it was the best thing that they've ever seen, and if there's one thing we should congratulate Baz Luhrmann on, is like maybe he saved cinema this year, because it definitely allowed for the older crowd who have not been to theaters in a while because of the pandemic or what have you. They finally came out and watched a movie, and if you look at the box office, I think it's kind of showing so much, and we could talk about that later too. But they loved every bit of it. But unfortunately, because it is an older crowd, I do feel like their mannerisms in a movie theater setting is to be desired, because I heard people talking throughout the whole movie. I heard people, once the Elvis music was playing, they would start singing along with it.
No,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
no,
Yeah. And the funny thing too is, at the very end of the movie, obviously we all know Elvis died and everything like that. When they announced in the movie that Elvis has passed away, there was a loud audible gasp in the back, like, and it's as if this person maybe is reliving it, through their memories growing up or whatever the case, and they were so enthralled in the movie that they forgot. It was just pretty hilarious. But I'm curious, how was your theater experience?
Yeah, I went in Washington, D.C. I was there on a work trip. It was a late showing. I want to say it was like 10:30 p.m. opening night that Thursday it came out. There were very few people there. It was maybe like 10, 15 people of a full. It was a late one on a weeknight, so maybe that's part of it. I enjoyed it greatly. The people next to me were talking throughout. I think one person was explaining to the other person in another language, like what was happening, and during
Yeah.
dialogue stuff, I could be wrong, but that's happened to me sometimes, like especially in like a New York City theater. And then
Mm.
I kind of don't want to be a dick because like I want them to kind of have an idea of what's going on, but I did kind of keep like at some point it got a little loud, or like as if no one else was there in the theater. Okay, so PSA to anyone listening. Definitely don't sing during music biopics or musicals. There's a sing-along showing for some of them, and go to that one if you want to do it. In your head, it sounds really fun and nice, and in everyone else's head, it's the old "Who sings this song again?" And in this case, it's right in front of you.
Mhm.
It's not a concert. Don't do that. The talking during it, if just do your best to like keep it to.
Right.
Um, the interesting thing to me though was I was in DC. We're both East Coast, and my buddy, I'm from Oklahoma, which is where I am now, which is why there's actually like more than 5 square feet around on the camera. I'm in Oklahoma right now, where I'm from, and my buddy saw it here opening night. No, a week after it came out, like that weekend, just a normal showtime. He said the audience was packed and
Wow.
gave an ovation, like clapped fully at the end the
Wow.
whole time. And that is actually contextualizing it. Like that's the audience I kind of wish I'd seen it with. We'll
Mhm.
get into like the race issue with Elvis and the South, and because they definitely address it in this movie.
Mhm.
But for now, just focusing on the Oklahoma aspect of it, I was looking at a list of Elvis's concerts, and like one of his first, like in his there's like there's a lot of websites dedicated to every Elvis info or memorabilia, whatever you would want. And they list every single concert he ever did. It was like in the first 15 shows, he's in Oklahoma.
Mhm.
Show number 20, he's in Oklahoma. Show number 25, he's in Oklahoma. It's around there. It's like this part of the country is a lot of Texas, a lot of Louisiana. He's opening for Buddy Holly early on, or I don't want to get that fact wrong, but he's playing concerts in Lubbock, which is where Buddy
Mhm.
Holly's from. And so, and I might have that backwards. Anyway, this part of the country is definitely where you get a lot of the super Elvis obsessive types.
Mhm.
And his impact here, which is something they do show in the movie, is there's the country aspect
Yeah.
to the music that Elvis is performing. And that's gonna, even though, yes, Elvis is an international icon, the feel of the music is based in more this part of the country. So I thought it was interesting that a week after the movie came out, I don't know if you go to a Top Gun screening or any of the latest, like Spider-Man was one of those where it kept being full. That might
Mhm.
be the only other movie in last year or so that's like on that level, where it's like a
Yeah.
properly full and people applauding a week later. Usually opening night of a comic book movie or something, you can get a crowd like that.
Mm.
So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And obviously it's doing well at the box office. I'm you mentioned old people talking movies. I think of that as a young person problem. So maybe it's a humanity problem. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I think that it's possible this movie is spanning generations enough. I had a thought, like maybe grandparents and parents, it's their era, and then maybe they take their kids. And there's the question of like, I think it was Elvis's daughter was talking about they believe this movie can help introduce Elvis to a whole new generation, which biopics do that. I
Yeah.
became a fan of Ray Charles after Jamie Foxx played Ray. I became a fan of Johnny Cash after Walk the Line with Joaquin Phoenix. That's happened multiple times in my life personally. And I'm as a music obsessive, it's like, okay, I put them and then I see it and I go, oh, I now I get the context of the music. I knew them, I maybe enjoyed some songs, but now I'm like, oh, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Music biopics are really good at that. Baz Luhrmann, I'm glad he took on this subject. The hip hop thing is interesting. I think that as far as Elvis's music being cutting edge at the time, that's hard to get across in
Mhm.
an era where rock and roll has been a thing for almost 70 years in our current day. So I think he was trying to do younger music to show that it was a younger, more edgy crowd kind of thing, which doesn't really make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
And then also there's what I mentioned before, the question of Elvis and the way that black influence music of the time, which would have been called race music,
Mhm.
but the way that that music influenced Elvis's recording career, and so having music like hip hop on in the soundtrack, it makes sense in that way too. It's
Mhm.
almost like the director's trying to address that, but it did feel kind of shoehorned in too. I don't
Yeah.
disagree. The times it happened, I think to whatever degree Elvis's music can speak for itself, and you
Mhm.
don't necessarily have to contextualize it so much. But maybe there's something going on there, at least some intent. And Baz Luhrmann's not an American director, and he's dealing with an American icon. So he kind of, some people think he fumbled these issues and how he addressed them.
Mhm.
Nobody's going to fumble it more than Forrest Gump, where the idea of who Elvis stole from was a young white kid, Forrest Gump, with the braces on, and that's where he got his style.
I'm a little disappointed that this movie didn't address that
Yeah,
because if we
yeah,
are to believe that that is a part of history, where was that?
yeah.
That's a glaring omission right there.
You got to be kidding me. It's honestly that's where it's been like you need an American director because they know Forrest Gump and the importance
Right.
that Forrest Gump had on American history. That makes total sense what you're saying.
Yeah.
Uh,
No.
So yeah, that's overall. I had it. I don't know if I would say it's a great movie. It's a Baz Luhrmann movie, very stylistic. And I know you're saying you haven't seen all his movies. If you've seen one Baz Luhrmann movie, he's so individualized and characteristic
Hmm.
as a director. If you've seen a Baz Luhrmann, you kind of get like what his deal is. He's so highly stylistic and almost magical
Yeah.
in the way he edits things. This movie in particular. I feel like he did that a little too much,
Hmm.
and he could have just let Elvis be Elvis. So overall, I don't know if it was like a great movie. I know I had a great time watching it,
Hmm.
we can get into the whys and what worked and what didn't work. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
my overall my theater experience and my big takeaways.
No, nice. No, it's good to hear again the aspect from a different part of the country because it is something that sometimes we often miss, right? Like we live on the East Coast, we live in a very heavy metropolitan area, so certain movies resonate better than others, depending on the market, right? And I do feel like the Midwest, the South, and all that, this is the type of movie that would do well because Elvis is such a staple in the minds of a lot of people, especially again when we talk about the older generation. But I'm pretty sure that that is transferred over to the younger generation in those areas because it's
Mhm.
such a part of the lexicon
It's
in
in the
those in the
water.
lives. Yeah, it's in the water. So I mean, you can't go to Memphis without someone saying, "Well, have you been to Graceland yet?" Because and yes, I have been to Graceland, and it's phenomenal piece of history to be able to look into and look at and all that. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. But before we continue, I wanted to quickly talk about Bulletproof Coffee. Bulletproof Coffee is my favorite coffee of choice to start off my mornings with. Why? Because it's clean coffee. What does that mean? Well, one, there are no chemicals in it. Why? Because they go through this multi step process of making sure that all of their beans are fully clean and free of any chemicals so that when you get the beans delivered to you, it is the pure beans, the pure coffee, the goodness that you've been wanting, the taste, the flavor, and the nutritional value as well, without worrying about any added chemicals or anything else put into the mix there. It also doesn't have that weird acidic taste that some coffees give you. I don't know how about you, but for me, some coffees kind of give me that weird sensation in my stomach, makes me a little burpy, and it kind of drags me down a little bit instead of really waking me up, which is something that I need from my coffee every day. Bulletproof also offers a lot of keto friendly snacks and supplements, anything that you need to kind of add to your everyday nutritional needs, add to your diet, and make you and pretty much transforms the way you feel every day. So for a limited time, if you use this code on that you see on the screen right now, LOWKEY GEEK, all caps one word, you can get 15% off your order. So what is it better than that, right? Check out the link in the description of this episode. Use this code, get yourself your discount, and make your mornings a little bit more bulletproof with Bulletproof Coffee. Now, back to the episode. But yeah, let's talk about the story beats, and let's talk about like the stuff that was covered. What I found interesting. Maybe you might feel like there's something that maybe they didn't pay too much attention on, or what have you, like that. But for example, the race issue. So I that seems to be like the most common piece of controversy when it comes to Elvis, right? Is that he's always the one being accused of stealing the black people's music, right? And you know, as if he's in like innovating it himself, right? But I think a lot of people don't realize he is a victim of kind of his environment. You know, he grew up in a predominantly black community. He was raised around, you know, the jazz and the quote unquote rock of the time in those communities. And then he was exposed to the church, the Baptist type church, and where, you know, that's where the gospel and everything comes from, you know, and I guess some of the R&B roots and all that. So him being a white guy who is into that music and now playing and singing that music, obviously they want to see how they can market that, especially when people are, you know, catching wind of it and liking it, right? So that what rang the bell in Colonel, you know, Tom Parker's mind is like, we have a way now to infiltrate the white community by bringing the black music that everyone wants to listen to, but is forbidden, and we're not allowed to, we don't want to have the black performers tour around. Well, here's the white representative of that, right? And it was really, really fascinating to see that being portrayed on screen. And it's a good reminder to those who may not be so familiar with the Elvis story that this was one of the reasons why all that has transpired and why they could be a kind of a misconception. But I was surprised on how heavy the story was based around Colonel Tom Parker. And I think that was something we see it immediately from the beginning, that it's almost as if he's the one narrating the story, right? And trying to defend himself and for like some of the decisions that he's made, you know, all this stuff like that. So he's the one talking to the audience as no. Like, you've heard it from all these other people. Hear it from me. You know, let me spin you a tale of, you know, the day I met Elvis and all that, which was fascinating because learning more about Tom Parker, again, I'm not fully versed in everything. Coming from like a circus, you know, kind of carnival background, it's interesting how he saw Elvis as his next attraction, right? Like one of the best scenes in the movie was you see Elvis just standing off, you know, in the distance, but behind him, or I think in front of him in the background, you see the poster for the geek, the freak, right? And in any circus carnival at the time, that is the number one attraction. Everyone wants to see the freak, right? Do crazy stuff. And you see Colonel Tom Parker just putting two and two together and be like, here it is. This is my next attraction. He is now my geek, and he is the one that I am going to exploit, and just show to the world, right? And he basically treats Elvis that way, you know. But at the same time, he's also was the innovator of a lot of things like merchandising and how to market, you know, one's, you know, talent and music and everything like that. The legendary deal he struck with Vegas, you know, and how Elvis was one of the first performers to have a residency in Vegas, and how that like kind of led the way for future generations of music. You know, Celine Dion's done it, Mariah Carey's done it, Beyonce has done it, you know, like major artists, right? So if Elvis didn't do that, that's not something I think would have been foreseen as, this is a great idea and this is what's going to make tons and tons of money. Now, how he went about it was a little shady and all that, and you definitely get to see a lot of that there too. So that's a lot of the stuff that I resonated really well, and I was like really happy to see portray on screen. Could they have maybe dove deeper in? Maybe, to certain aspects, but I'm curious to hear what part of the story fascinated you the most, or what you thought were missing, knowing that you did know a lot of the backstory there.
Yeah, first off, because we're talking about the issue of Elvis, race, borrowing, stealing, and the business realities of that time and of his manager. Um, I think that's not a bad place to start, because that's where the movie starts. The movie starts with young Elvis. I don't remember the very, very beginning. It's Tom Hanks as Colonel Tom Parker. Which let me get each performance kind of out of the way as we go through it. That performance is bizarre. I like it. I found it very fascinating and interesting. Like hard to
Mhm.
look away when Tom Hanks is donning a fat suit, period piece clothing, and the accent, which is kind of like it's kind of like the terminal accent, where it's just like generic European East
Mhm.
Russia something. And I would describe the accent as all shook up, to use an Elvis
Heyo.
song. It's kind of like, and if compared to the actual Tom Parker, it doesn't sound much like Tom Parker. It's
Right.
more
Yeah.
Elvis is doing the generic we don't know where this guy's from thing, which he kind of done before when he made up was it Victor, the character from the Terminal, where
From the terminal. Yeah.
it was a fictional country. So anyway, Tom Hanks, iconic American figure himself, did playing the bad guy in this one, and it starts off right, and he's doing the let me defend myself. I've gotten a bad rap, which he has, and it's correctly given the
Mhm.
bad reputation of Tom Parker. And I go, oh my God, is this movie about to either reveal the truth that Tom Parker wasn't the bad guy, he's been framed, or are they about to take the side of the bad guy? And no, they just have it to where the main character narrator is explaining that he's not a bad guy, but they display very clearly
Yeah.
throughout the movie he's a bad guy. So I thought that was an interesting choice. I don't know if that had anything to do with like the rights or what material it was based on, or oh, this is a movie about majority Tom Parker. I don't know how that works really. Um, so that aside, the movie then, if not right after that, very early on, is doing Elvis as a young boy, and this movie goes boyhood to death, is basically his whole life, and we're showing him enjoying music, blues music nearby, where he's raised, and we're seeing him then go to the gospel, um, going to see a gospel choir at church, and kind of like going back and forth. Which I said race music earlier. There's also like there's the gospel aspect, the blues aspect, and then there's also the country thing that is kind of
Mhm.
being thrown in there. The real question I think that anyone, and I think any viewer, based on their own life experiences and how they feel about where these lines stand, is Elvis borrowing, stealing? Is he paying tribute? It seems like there are plenty of interviews where Elvis is giving credit to those artists and shouting them
Mhm.
out and saying that he's a fan. It would be much worse, in my opinion, that if Elvis is just straight up stealing and hiding the originators of his style, then that is unforgivable to my mind. That's
Yeah.
more pure plagiarism. In some ways, he's combining these things in a way that only Elvis could, and throwing maybe some extra country in it and a little more honky,
Mhm.
of the honky tonk variety, but dual meaning intended. And so what we end up having is someone who can be on TV, who is able to have a concert where white kids can go. Because if in the other situation, you wouldn't be allowed to, even in the South, you wouldn't even be allowed to have white kids in the audience of a black show.
Right.
So there's a market there. There's this amazing music that's happening. Elvis is in some ways combining these things, and in some ways just kind of ripping it off. There's a story, and I don't know how apocryphal it is, but there's a story, and I still find it fascinating. I believe it's true. It's something I learned in that history of rock and roll class. But Elvis is doing more like the Blue Moon country music thing, croony blues, slower
Mhm.
stuff, a little cornier, and they know that he's got something, and they don't. But they're like, okay, this guy's handsome. He can definitely do something. And then they've been in the studio. They keep trying take after take, trying to find something that works better. And then eventually, he's just like delirious from being in the studio all day. He's tired. He's fucking around, and like you do, like we do sometimes after we've recorded a lot or beforehand, when we're just being goofy. And
Mhm.
that's when he develops his and then that's like the original moment of that style. This movie shows it a little differently. It's him at a concert and he's nervous, and that's why his legs are shaking and he's doing his little dance. But either way, if Elvis is kind of doing like a parody or a mockery of black music of that time, that to me is also unforgivable. And he's just exploiting it and saying, "Oh, I got something here. Look how funny I'm being," or something like that. I
Mhm.
wouldn't be surprised if Tom Parker cynically sees it that way, or and says, "I have no problem making money off of that." I think Tom Parker would have made money off a real geek, and I think they even I don't know if they said it explicitly, but he maybe did.
Yeah.
Um, my understanding is that Elvis is a genuine fan of the music, but regardless of the truth behind Elvis, this movie goes to great strides to address that question.
Yeah.
I think of the two biggest knocks. That's number one. The two biggest knocks on Elvis' career. There's that, and then another one being like he's kind of a sellout, or he's washed up, or his music falls off. He's not socially conscious, which in the '60s, not too long after he comes out, becomes pretty important to a lot of fans. And then he's quickly seen as the prior generation, which for someone who goes from hot stuff, 54, 55, to 58, he's in the military, and then 60, he's doing movies after that, and not doing any cutting edge music ever again. He's doing some good music after that. There's some good records, but nothing cutting edge again. So he only has a few years there where it's really hot stuff. Um, the movie addresses both of those for sure. I think especially in our current era, you have to address the biggest sins of any artist that you're doing the biopic about. And if you don't, there's got to be a reason. Like there's a Michael Jackson musical on Broadway right now, and they don't address the whole issue because it's set in '91 and before. It's like the narrator is telling that story up until then. This movie definitely is addressing the issues at hand, and in some ways, it's almost like they go too far out of their way, and in some ways, Baz Luhrmann may be having a couple moments where it doesn't seem like he knows how to address this very American question. There's one where they're showing a Martin Luther King speech and trying to imply that MLK meant a lot to Elvis, which I don't know, but wouldn't be surprised by. But they're also using that moment when talking about Elvis's career as if trying to apply an MLK quote kind of to like the moment Elvis is going through. Now it's weird again. But there are other times where they definitely are dealing with this question explicitly and characters are having conversations about it. So that's I think as far as that big issue goes, that a lot of fans are going to go into wondering about. They at least handled it, which it's going to be up to any different audience member if they handled it well. There's a few moments to me that were a little cringy on that regard, but none of it was, oh my gosh, they're trying to dust this under the rug or say that Elvis was nobody was culpable in stealing music and infringement or plagiarism, etc. That said, I think we've talked a lot about this movie and haven't mentioned Austin Butler's performance as Elvis.
Yeah.
My goodness. That to me is the biggest selling ticket item for this movie.
Yeah.
Everything else, like Baz Luhrmann and Tom Hanks, those are pretty known quantities, and you get a solid, not their best work, but solid work from them. Austin Butler being a pretty unknown, I guess he's got some Disney credits and a credit in Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood playing Rex or Tex. And I remember when I heard about this movie, I'm looking at this guy, I'm going, is he going to be able to pull this off? This is a tall order. But then you see the trailer, and he definitely, in my opinion, pulls it off. There's something to be desired about his dramatic acting. There's a moment where Elvis is getting broken up with, and he's all torn up, and he's in Heartbreak Hotel. And it's, to me, that acting, like there's a few flop moments, but also Elvis, he wasn't really a Daniel Day-Lewis himself. So I think it's passable as far as like he's kind of oversimplifying the motions, especially when you're talking about an icon. You don't want to get too into Elvis impersonator territory or just doing an impression of the guy. There's plenty of those out there. As far as embodying and capturing that charisma and releasing it, especially for the live performance of Elvis, to me, that was special. There are plenty of people who've tried it, and there's a lot of people who wouldn't dare. Austin Butler went for it, and in my opinion, he pulled it off. I don't think they would have, if it was just I don't think this movie has like a $85 million budget. Baz Luhrmann's name on it. There's some good, it's worth checking out the interviews, but Austin Butler and Baz Luhrmann talking about the process of the tryouts, getting the movie funded. Okay, you have an Elvis. There's a bunch of other people who Austin Butler beat out for the role. And it makes sense, in my opinion, when you watch the movie. How did you feel about I don't know, is accuracy the question, or is it just like, was it good? Like, how do you feel he did?
Well, it's like what you said. It's about embodying the the personality and the vibe of Elvis, right? This movie would not have worked without Austin Butler helming the role, because his portrayal of Elvis, it, like you said, it didn't feel like I was watching the multitude of Elvis impersonators that are around this country, that are around the world. You know, I didn't feel like I was watching that. I felt like I was watching someone who really put themselves in Elvis's shoes and was portraying Elvis for Elvis on the big screen. Yeah, some of the dramatic moments and maybe the dialogue that was given, maybe not a lot of that was that strong, but it's really in the overall musical performances. And you know, and there are some key moments where the relationship between him and Colonel Tom Parker and how that was portrayed, you know, like I think it just really worked. And we talked about this before, where you look at the roster of people that was, you know, kind of auditioning for this role. He beat out Harry Styles, you know, which is like the biggest name in music today, especially like as far as the younger singers are concerned. And he has his own acting career that is budding, you know, and he has a movie coming up soon that I'm so desperately looking forward to. You know, and what is it called? It's Alright, My Darling, or something like that. It's him and Florence Pugh.
Marvel one, 'cause
he is in the Marvel universe and all that. Spoiler alert if you don't know what we're talking about. But you know, he was in Dunkirk, and now he has this other role coming up, which looks really fascinating. But the fact that he was able to beat out Harry Styles for this role says a lot. And you see it when you're watching it on screen, you know. And I really enjoyed his performance. Tom Hanks, you know.
Sorry, if I can, while we're on that topic. Ansel Elgort, West Side Story, and Baby Driver beat him out. Miles Teller, who's now they're vying against this movie at box office for Top Gun.
Yeah.
Aaron Taylor Johnson and Harry Styles. That is unreal.
That's a lot of the young talent. Yeah.
Oh goodness, and there's not a ton of actors in that. I was going to go off on a tangent. Yeah, you're going to Tom Hanks.
Yeah, no, it's like Tom Hanks was Tom Hanks. You know, he can now say he finally has his Winston Churchill moment, you know, where he's just like, you know, fat suit, prosthetics, all that stuff, you know, playing an absurd caricature of a character. I did watch some old interviews of Tom Parker, and you're right. He does not sound exactly the way Tom Hanks was portraying. But I guess that was kind of a creative choice to kind of make him a little bit over the top and absurd and all that, you know, because again, larger than life persona, right? And we're dealing with two larger than life personas here in Elvis and Colonel Tom Parker. And I think without these two, really honestly, like this movie probably would not be as appealing without these two actors portraying their roles that they were cast for. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, so I definitely agree. It's almost like by doing that caricature of Tom Parker, he's making him more villainous. And that way, when he's reading the dialogue, saying, "No, I'm a good guy," listen, it's almost like it lets the audience know, look at this man, he's obviously not good. And we see it all the time where the villain is the uglier character, or is kind of like disfigured in some way. It's almost like they went over the top in that way, and Tom Hanks went with those decisions. It's also something worth mentioning that this is the movie where Tom Hanks gets COVID when he's in Australia filming, and I actually don't know looking back, but it might be the first or one of the first COVID victims, productions that are victims of COVID and had to shut down. I'm sure there was other ones that got interrupted in ways, but that was the day that that America stopped, at least. And so this movie coming out in 2022, so long later, I was just looking at like the different casting stuff, and I was, that timeline. So I don't know to what degree or how that affected his performance. I'm curious, and I don't know if they've told us or if we'll ever know what scenes were before his diagnosis, what scenes were after, because Tom Hanks seems to have had a good spirit throughout, and when he did SNL, it was well done. But There might be something interesting about seeing how his performance is different before and after, especially for any actor. There's times where during productions people would take a long break because of COVID stuff, and they come back, and now you got to get that accent back again, or you might look a little different, etc. So that said, if we take into the fact that he was the American guinea pig of that whole thing, it makes it a little more impressive of a feat that he didn't just like, no, screw this, I'm out. I don't want to be. I don't know.
Right.
It's quite a performance, even if it wasn't. I don't know if it's going to get nominated for anything. Honestly, knowing the Oscars, it probably will. But it was quite a performance. He definitely went all out. Bless him for that.
No, for sure. And again, talking about the production of a movie like this, and it's, again, Lurhmann and how long he takes in making these movies. Something of note is Cody Smith-McPhee is cast in this. Ooh, and we lost Blake. But Cody Smith-McPhee has a small role in this movie, and it's interesting to see him after being such high praise and recognition in Power of the Dog just last year, how this movie comes out now and his role is small, and we really don't see him that much on screen and as much from his character. And you have Olivia de Jong, who plays Priscilla Presley, who I think she did a pretty decent job. Again, I feel like there wasn't that much on-screen time when it comes to Priscilla there, or you don't really get a good 100% sense of the relationship between Elvis and Priscilla, but you definitely do get enough to know that, she was definitely a huge part of Elvis's life there, especially in the later years. And for you Stranger Things fans like myself, it was nice to see Dacre Montgomery, better known as Billy from Stranger Things, but it was nice to see Dacre show up in this movie, where it was like one of those moments where he showed up and I was like, hey, that's Billy from Stranger Things, playing the character of Steve Binder or Binder. I don't know what the last name, how you pronounce it is, but it was just really, really nice to see that. So trying to get Blake back here, but I think it's a good chance now to kind of move on to, since he did bring it up about award consideration and all that. I feel like this movie is the type of movie that would be that a lot of people would pay attention to as far as, who could be contending for an Oscar, when the nominees are announced next year. I do fear that the movie came out very early on in the year, that it might easily be forgotten as the year progresses, because as a lot of people know, a lot of the Oscar baity movies come out later in the year, and with this movie coming out just around when summer starts, might get mislooked or overlooked, I should say. Austin Butler, I think, should, as of right now, should be considered for an acting category, for sure. Tom Hanks, I don't know if they're just going to give it to him just because of legacy or whatever. But there's a lot of movie left to be seen this year, so it'll be interesting to see where this would land. I'm pretty sure maybe screenplay or cinematography could be something that would be considered, especially with how well this movie, or frenetic, I should say, the editing is in this movie, with a lot of the lights and a lot of the cuts and just the overall storytelling that's done visually along with the acting there. So Blake, do we have you back, or
am I here?
You're here, but I don't see you.
Oh, okay, hold on. Can you see me now?
There you are.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I was thinking maybe I'd go and change into the full gold, the Elvis Vegas suit, or like a fat suit or something like that, and do a full costume change, but I couldn't find it. Apparently, I left it back in New York.
That's too bad, because that would have been amazing for you to come back in donning the full Elvis.
Yeah, nothing more exciting than that. I did.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you for holding it down. Well, yeah, no, of course. As far as awards consideration and all that, like, what are your thoughts on this movie?
Austin Butler the Oscar right now. I don't give a shit. Honestly, if his acting quality was better, I would say he'd be a front runner right now. I think
Oops.
now
Oh
he's going
no.
to be
Oh,
in
okay.
again. I would
Yeah, you
say
cut out.
he's Austin Butler, top five nominees. Uh, Shortlist him right now. I don't know if he's in it at the end of the year. I would not be surprised. Tom Hanks, we're looking at legacy stuff, and I know he's been nominated lately. I don't think he's had a win since the early 90s, unless I miss. And then plus the COVID of it all
Mm-hmm.
and his celebration. He's at that point in his career where he could start getting more legacy nominations. I don't know that Baz Luhrmann's going to get love. A lot of times, especially more stylistic directors like the Wes Andersons, et cetera, like they don't get a lot of love from the Oscars.
Right.
I don't know that writing is going to get much. Editing's an interesting one because there's a like was the Bohemian Rhapsody thing where it's like the most editing sometimes wins, even though it's a two
Mm-hmm.
hour and 40-minute movie. The other thing I think worth mentioning while we're talking about editing, the movie's long as hell. It did not feel long in the moment.
Right.
And there are entire, huge, important chunks of Elvis's life. And this isn't like, oh, the book is better kind of commentary of like, oh, you should have focused on this moment in 61 that was important. No, it's literally there are moments that the movie is saying are important and that changes
Mm-hmm.
Elvis's life forever. His mom dying. You blink and you miss that moment in the movie. I heard another person saying this on a podcast, and I felt the exact same way. I was like, okay, thank you. I thought I was they literally like look down, they look up, they go, "Oh my gosh, did I miss something? Like what happened?" And they're like, "Oh, his mom died." They're like you're trying to
Right.
piece it together for them. I'm going, "Well, no way, because that would have been such a long, drawn out scene. They would have explained it. No." And there was a couple different moments like that in the movie where they just right by it.
Mm-hmm.
There's other things that are very drawn out, and if you want a movie that's got like the nervous guy quiet behind a microphone and the guitar just kind of starts and he's standing there and you're waiting for the whole world to stop and explode at the same time. This movie builds out and draws the drama of some of those, especially the concert performances. Those are
Mm-hmm.
really fun. I wonder if Baz Luhrmann got rid of the more stylized moments that are more like montage mixed with spectacle at the same time kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing. Like if we got rid of those, I don't know what this runtime is. But I don't know. I think editing for the Oscars, it does get nominated, it might win just because there was a lot of cuts, and that's part of
Yeah.
what made Austin Butler really pop as Elvis. After seeing the movie, I watched some Elvis documentaries and I watched some old concert footage. A lot of those are just like the single cameras on Elvis the whole time, and every now and then they'll like pan a little bit. There's scenes here where it's cutting hundreds of times during a song. Um, that helps sell those concert moments to show how energetic Elvis was compared to other things that were on the Ed Sullivan show at the time or anywhere else. You kind of have to do that nowadays. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of like music videos where they're cutting so often, and just like movies in general. It wasn't so excessive that it felt like, there's some movies you watch you feel like you're going to be sick. It wasn't necessarily that, but there was a lot of editing, and they did pretty good with that. The sound editing, I could see that getting
Mm-hmm.
nominated. I'm not sure what else, um, but I definitely think right now Tom Hanks and Austin Butler, I wouldn't be surprised if they both got it, and then depending on how the nominees shake out, right at the end of the year, there's always a rush of a bunch more.
Yeah.
Maybe they're totally off the list by then. Who knows? But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be willing to say right now, wouldn't be surprised either way. But they both deserve it. To my mind, I wouldn't. It's not the kind of nomination I would be mad about, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, how disgusting! Like they were really good performances. And these
Yeah.
kind of movies, like Renee Zellweger winning for the Judy Garland biopic a couple years ago, even though nobody saw the damn movie and it was out of theaters before I
Right.
even had a chance to buy a ticket. I went to my cart. I said, "You have 10 minutes left." They go, "Sorry, it's already out of theaters." Um, so she wins for that. So this is the kind of movie too that the Oscars would recognize. So I don't know. That'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. And just to close at least this portion out, the movie runtime is 2 hours and 39 minutes. So I could, and from what I heard, he had an original longer cut of the movie. So it'll be interesting to see like what made it on what ended up on the cutting room floor and all that. But he definitely had a lot of footage to work with, especially when you talk about a lot of the cuts and all that, and how a lot of the musical performances did feel very drawn out, especially just him leading up to his performance. Like those things are very drawn out. And the things that are like glanced over, yes, the mom is a perfect example of that, the mom passing away. But even the budding relationship and love of affair with Priscilla Presley, it's like it happened within what seemed like a night, and then that was it. And it was just so quick and fast. But I guess those are just some of the creative choices that were made just to move the story along, because I guess people assume that that's going to happen. Let's focus more on this stuff and that stuff, and let's focus on so much on the shady dealings behind the scenes of Colonel Tom Parker and the Vegas owners, and getting out of debt, and locking in Elvis on his long tenure there, and preventing him from touring worldwide, and Like, I feel like a lot of those moments were so long and so much information and so much time spent, but I guess it served a purpose, and it did have like that impact of like, wow, this is crazy, right? Or kind of like the scenes where Elvis is, inebriated because of all the drugs he's taking, and just to get him going, to keep him going, which is another thing that I'm glad they kind of addressed too, because I think people just assume that he was just, addicted to drugs, just, like you would think of someone who's addicted to drugs today, but it was drugs that was helping him perform and just stay awake and all that. And it was just something that was kind of like forced on him to kind of be like, all right, well, you're performing basically every night, you need to keep going, here's your energy, right? And it was just, and unfortunately it caused his demise at the end there. So
this Elvis has such a full and huge life, so the leaving out certain things, that's going to happen no matter what. I do think that the pacing of the movie is kind of herky jerky, but that's going to be almost impossible to mess with, to get all of that right for somebody with a full life like Elvis. So let's don't be cruel about that. I have a bingo card here. I'm trying to get as many song titles as I can.
Nice.
The one I forgot I meant to mention was for Oscars was hair and makeup. I'm booking it right now. If I were to call it, I'm just going to say it'll win. But it feels like the kind of thing that they would love is the between Tom Hanks and the fat suit and the period piece and those. I felt like that was all very well done. I think that might get a nomination. I wouldn't be surprised if it won. The other one, speaking of of nominees, Cody Smith-McPhee and his little, it wasn't really a cameo. He had a full role, and I don't know. I think on the timeline it would have began filming before Power of the Dog, but either way, it'd be close to each other, if not. But I think so, and so he has a small role, which is really fun to see right after somebody blows up. And we've talked about Cody Smith-McPhee so much during award season. He has a good, like, there's not a ton of actors in this movie. Sorry, there are a lot of actors, but there's not a ton of main characters. It's basically Tom Hanks and Austin Butler carrying the show. Cody Smith-McPhee, other than like the mom and dad, might be the fifth build or like the fifth most screen time, maybe six. That was fun to see him though as an up and coming artist who's a real character, a real figure, and then we see him become like an early Elvis impersonator, just someone who's going, "Oh, that style is very popular. I like it. That's very cool." And then we don't see him after that, which probably happened to a lot of people. A lot of copycats throughout history sound like the cool guy, and then nobody remembers him because they're not the trailblazer. But I think he was playing Jimmy Rogers, and I'm not going to nerd out on American music history, but that itself is interesting. Yeah. Anyway, shout out Cody Smith-McPhee. It was cool seeing him with that role.
No, for sure. So as we close out this episode here, let's just talk about where this would rank in your Baz Luhrmann list. I am expecting that you have a list like this on Letterboxd, and if not, you should have one. Now I'll just quickly go because again, I have not had a chance to see a lot of his movies. The one that really sticks out has always been Romeo and Juliet. And I remember when I was, or should I say, Romeo plus Juliet. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Romeo. Right, Romeo plus Juliet.
Okay, yeah.
Came out in 1996, and I remember this movie very fondly because one, I was a huge Claire Danes fan at the time, and I think it just hit me at the right moment, and Leonardo DiCaprio, I remember him on Growing Pains, and now he's becoming a budding Hollywood actor as far as feature films are concerned. You had John Leguizamo, who was also like becoming very hot at the time, and just the mix of Shakespeare and modern, I guess, crime like story, or just like it was just like an interesting mix of, instead of swords, we're using guns, and very stylish looking guns, and then we have very stylish locations that look like California, and LA, and I just think it hit me perfectly at that moment because it really caught my attention, and I'll never forget. Another reason why I'll never forget that too is because I saw it with a group of friends, one of which who was a huge Shakespeare fan and was pretty much quoting every line of the movie. The fact that he was able to remember all of those lines and all the dialogue was just fascinating. I don't know if I was more fascinated listening to him or watching the movie, but the combination definitely was interesting there. I did also watch the Gatsby. Sorry, just Gatsby.
It is the Great Gatsby.
It is. I thought it's just called Gatsby. No.
No, it's not the Romeo plus Juliet thing, which, by the way, also, this is so weird. I don't even know if this is worth a tangent, but I looked it up. Romeo plus Juliet, damn it, is technically called William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Because the poster and the way they make, because it is but they put the plus sign instead because he's so stylized.
Right,
so that's why it calls it Romeo plus Juliet, and it's kind of funny. But no, it's technically William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. And the other literary adaptation he does is The Great Gatsby.
Gotcha. Okay, so The Great Gatsby gave us a wonderful meme that people used just tremendously of, Leo cheersing the camera basically with all the fireworks happening in the background and all that. I did not like that movie. I was not a fan. I thought it was extremely boring. And I know that's a pretty much hot take for you there, but yeah, was not a fan of that movie. I mean, visually, I thought it was amazing to watch, but I felt so bored watching that movie. And to close out my list of what I've seen, I've only seen half of Moulin Rouge, so I need to go back and finish that. But I am curious to hear what your thought is as to where this would rank on your letterbox list of Baz Luhrmann must-watch movies.
I'm so glad that we have a movie show where we can tell you about movies that you should have seen 20 years ago. I'm glad we started this for this reason only.
Hey, we all have our holes.
Okay. I'll leave that there. Sorry. I promise I was paying attention and also trying to do like muscle memory Googling of Baz Luhrmann Oscar history, and I've just had so many mind-blowing things come before me in the last few minutes. I'm going to go and rank my Bazzies right now.
Sure.
That's what I call my Baz Luhrmann Award.
I like that. That should be the name of your list, the Bazzies.
The Bazzies, yep. All right, so I have not seen Strictly Ballroom, which is his first his breakout movie. I promise I'm not going to go too far here, but that movie won a bunch of awards in Australia, not in America. So I'm going to leave that off the list. Romeo plus Juliet, Moulin Rouge, Australia, Great Gatsby, and Elvis. I was going to watch Strictly Ballroom after seeing Elvis to get ready for this episode, but I watched Australia first instead, which was another long 2 to 3 hour one. And there's about an hour left on that one on my queue, and I plan on never, ever finishing that trash. I'm not the only person who felt that way. It was widely panned. And I'm only mad because I really have wanted to see Strictly Ballroom. It came out in 92. I've wanted to see it for so long. I remember my mom recommended that movie to me when I was younger. So that's been on my watch list since about the age of, 10, less. So I'm leaving that off. Australia, bottom of the list, bad. Okay, actually, I'm not as ready as I thought that I was. We'll love Baz Luhrmann's movies. I love Romeo plus Juliet, Moulin Rouge, Gatsby, and Elvis. I'm gonna go and no. I currently have a three-way tie in the middle for Romeo,
Oh.
Juliet, Gatsby, and Elvis. I'm going to simplify this for myself and say that Elvis is going to be lower on that list. Over
Mhm.
time, that might change. My first feelings after seeing some of all these other movies of his, other than Australia, is I was exhilarated. I was like, punch the ceiling, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just experienced that. Maybe the bias is he's been doing this for so long. He takes so long with his movies that I was expecting this, and it was a little worse than I thought it would be. Not much. So I'm going to put Elvis. So it's going to go strictly bottom off the list. I'll show you at the bottom Elvis right above that, which is not an insult because I
Mhm.
love these other movies. It's going to go after that. Gatsby right above that, which I actually love, love, love Gatsby. I watched it multiple times in theaters and have defended it vociferously. Right above that, we're going to go Romeo plus Juliet. Mainly for the Leo of it all, the 90s of it all, John Leguizamo. It's edgier and it's more cutting edge, especially since that's his second movie.
Right.
And he's really going for the Baz Luhrmann of it all and taking some sacred property, modernizing it, doing his thing to it, and in my opinion, it was a success. And that is a much taller feat
Mhm.
than Gatsby is. Although, if we were just go off which one did you enjoy more as a better film, maybe Gatsby wins, honestly. But I'm gonna give the number two spot to Romeo plus Juliet and number one, Moulin Rouge. Legendary. I've seen it twice on Broadway. I was at it on Broadway the night Tom Hanks got COVID. Came out of the show, turned on my phone, and it was just blowing up with all the notifications of America shutting down. I remember asking the person I went with, like, should we take the subway home or should we walk the bridge? Because I'm kind of freaked out right now. So again, we'll go top to bottom this time. Moulin Rouge, Romeo plus Juliet in the two spot. Three, Great Gatsby. Four, Elvis. Five, Strictly Ballroom. And six, any movie but Australia. And then Australia below that. So that is so hard to watch.
I love how Strictly Ballroom made your list and you haven't seen it yet. So
Oh no, I would put movies that he didn't even direct above Australia. It was so damn bad.
so Interstellar, definitely
There's
above that.
all the movies Baz Luhrmann's ever watched or
Yeah,
been on the set
yeah,
of or has
yeah.
been friends with the person directing it. Worth mentioning, I think, is I was saying earlier while we're talking Bazzies, I was saying earlier that the Oscars don't often award highly stylized directors, and they might. This is also the kind of movie they might just fully ignore it. I don't
Mhm.
think so, especially after like Bohemian Rhapsody type stuff. But there's only a few categories where it feels like a shoe-in for nomination to me. But for example, Moulin Rouge is going to be his most celebrated movie. It
Right.
won Best Art Direction, which is now Best Production Design. I'm going to throw that on the list for this one. That could very well be a nominee for this one. Best Costume Design. I think I said hair and makeup earlier. Moulin
Yeah.
Rouge won. I'm going to say costume design and hair and makeup. We'll put it on there. Back then, it wasn't called hair and makeup. It was Best Makeup, which Moulin Rouge was nominated for. So I guess it had two wins and Best Picture, actress. Director wasn't director he wasn't nominated, but Whoopi Goldberg had the line. I guess the movie just directed itself, something like
Yeah.
'cause it was nominated for Best Picture. Then the other one is for Gatsby at the Oscars. It won costume and production design. So if I was going to say anything about those, I think those are two categories where I would feel more comfortable with him.
Hmm.
And then who he uses. That should be if there's a cohort of Elvis movie. What was it? Mad Max with the Australian group of folks and like
Yep.
it'll happen every now and then. I'm hoping that that'll be a fun group and could be fun to watch at award season. We'll see though. It's way too early to tell.
Yeah.
And I know we're gonna talk mid-year awards at some point for ourselves and favorite movies so far. What we're looking forward to.
Hmm.
I want to take stock at some point though because I do not know where this one necessarily stands. I'm just going off gut there.
Yeah. Let's just hope that if they do get win in production design and makeup, hair and makeup, that they at least show it live on TV. and not pre-recorded in a ceremony held an hour before the show.
You're trying to get me to rant. Where, dude? It's also the kind of movie where they would throw in a fake original song, or like an original song that's acting like it's part of it. I don't know what that would be, but that's another one that could be fun. Like, I know Casey Musgraves is on here, Doja Cat. Those Diplo's on the soundtrack. Those would be fun to have, but I don't know what's original. I'm not going through it now, but what's original and what's not. So
right.
There's the Eminem song on there. To me, that was flat. That's another one of those, like, does Baz Luhrmann understand the issues that he's dealing with? It was like, yeah, it's a commentary on it, but anyway, I think that's an original song. So Eminem.
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. That's so weird to me.
Yeah.
But okay, we're not getting into Eminem territory right now, but Eminem might be going for the Oscars moment again. We'll see.
It'll be funny if it does make the cut, because it quite possibly could be him and Gaga going at each other, because Gaga has that original song in Top Gun Maverick. So that would be really, really fascinating to see. And again, who knows what else would come up for the rest of the year. But those are definitely probably like the first two there. But to close things out, again, just to go back on Romeo plus Juliet, I think one of the reasons why that also resonates so much, and it ranks pretty high on your list as well. It took a lot of risk in telling a modernized version of a Shakespearean classic, but keeping the same Shakespearean dialogue.
Yeah,
like that. Unbelievably wild and very ballsy on him to do so like that, because we've seen retellings of Shakespearean stories, but they kept it within the period. Or if they modernized it, it's going to be a mix of, like, you know, regular dialogue and some quotes here and there and stuff like that. But we've never seen it where maintaining the same dialogue but having everything else modern. Like, it was just so stylized in that aspect.
That's actually, I know there's a list out there, but Hamlet 2000, Ethan Hawke, is another one of those, and that was not nearly successful. No. So there's not going to be very many that try, and there's going to be so few that succeed. That really makes it stand out. You're right. I don't know of another one that succeeds. That's gonna keep me up tonight. Thanks a lot.
That'll be like another interesting list for you to add to Letterboxd, is like, you know, the modern tellings of Shakespeare.
Thanks for activating my OCD right before bedtime.
Oh yeah, no problem. That's what I do. But again, as we close this episode out, it doesn't matter at all what Blake and I think. What matters most is what all of you think. So let us know in the comments, is Elvis a movie that you've seen? What were your thoughts and feelings about it? If it was a movie that you weren't planning on watching, have we changed your mind somehow? Or are you just not caring and you just want to hear our opinions? Well, let us know all of that stuff in the comments section. Thank you once again for tuning in. Again, if you're brand new to this channel and you liked our little conversation here, hit that like, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And for audio listeners, if you want to hear more episodes like this, you could do so by going to the LOWKEY GEEK channel there on your podcast platform of choice. Before we sign out, Blake, where can people find you online?
All right, dude, you really opened up a can of worms here, because I'm about to make my Letterboxd list for the Bazzies and in the Shakespeare. Much Ado About Nothing, Joss Whedon is the only other one that I'm finding coming up, and that was trash. So shout out again, Baz Luhrmann. Thank you for being cool.
Hell yeah.
Cool product. Speaking of movie lists, I am on Letterboxd. My screen name is Blake Wolf SSN. If you'll allow me one last little tangent, the list I'm proudest of on there is Christmas movies, and it's called Christmas movies that are definitely Christmas movies, even though obviously they're not. It's a movie that has any tiny, like, there's always the debate of, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Is the Batman, whichever one, Danny DeVito, is that a Christmas movie?
Batman Returns, yeah.
Thank you. Anytime there's a movie that has even the slightest any little Christmas, I throw it on that list at Letterboxd on my account there. This movie, Elvis, went right on that list. Within a couple minutes of it starting, there's nothing Christmassy. But there's a Christmas special later on. But before that ever happened, they just show a Christmas card with Tom Parker and Elvis on it. Really poor Photoshop from the 70s, I guess. And I was like, boom, this is now a Christmas movie. The only other, my favorite one on that list, I'm now at almost 80 movies, it's getting out of hand. That's my problem to deal with. But my other favorite one is there's a Salma Hayek slasher assassin weird movie called Everly. And one of the assassins just whistles jingle bells before they murder someone. That's it. That's the only, and it's like, boom, Christmas movie thrown on the list. So holidays come, you need some recommendations of what to put on for the family. Gather everyone around and go to Letterboxd, and my name is Blake Wolf SSN.
See, look at all the fun you're missing out on, and all the potential movies you could be enjoying with yourself, a friend, your family, your loved ones, and all that, especially come the holidays. So definitely do check him out on Letterboxd there. As for myself, Lowkey Geek, you could see all the screen handles and screen names and all that stuff on the screen in front of you or in the description of this episode. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay cool, stay classy, stay safe, and we'll catch you next time. Peace out, everyone. The building. Taking care of business.